like I adjust it every time, so I'm not sure if it's alright or not. But sometimes it feels like parallel. What do y'all think? Please chat. Yeah, I find it's easiest to work on things at night. Quiet, less distractions, fewer distractions. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. So this week I actually switched up some of the things so that we could talk about conditional statements, because I said that we were going to talk about them before. So now we are going to talk about them. We actually weren't going to talk about them, but since so many people were interested in making things bounce, that's what we're going to do. So yeah, I think on the is the volume low again? It did this yesterday too, where it automatically moved the volume down. Is it still too low? Is it that the music is too loud? But it's still volume's still too low? What the fuck? Maybe it's using the wrong microphone. Let me see. I swear this thing, oh, it's using the wrong microphone. How about this? Is that better? I don't know why it switched which microphone it was using. It was using it's not that better? Okay, cool. Yeah, you gotta let me know if it's ever doing that, because it's using my laptop microphone, which I don't even know where it is. It's buried somewhere, it's mounted on some thing, and it has fans underneath it, so it's not very useful. So if for whatever reason you can't hear me, just let me know in the chat, because if you can't hear me, other people can't hear me. So we're good now? Everyone's good? Everyone can hear me okay? It's clear enough? So let's go ahead and get started. Let me go ahead and find my notes thing here. Okay, so last time we talked about, what did we talk about last time? Does anyone remember what we talked about last time? So that was last Wednesday. So we used them on Monday. So you had your homework. So variables, thank you TJ. So we talked about variables, right? And we talked about how you can use variables to animate things. And so when we look at, and actually my screen's getting a little bit cut off here. It's okay, you don't need to see the corner. So we have an example, right? So in this example, we have w equals w plus 1. So w being a variable. It could be, maybe it's an integer or a float. It could be either one. So if you were to take, in this case, we're talking about taking the value of w and making it whatever w is plus 1, right? So let's say that it starts off in the first frame. Let's say w has a value of 3. So if you add 1 to 3, in the next frame, it's going to become 4. And if you add one more, it's going to become 5. If you add one more, it becomes 6, and so on. So you can see how a variable can be used to store information, and then it could be modified so that it stores the new value each time. So does that sound familiar to people? Were people able to get that conceptually from last week? Cool. So I said that we would talk about conditionals today, conditional statements. So now we are going to talk about conditionals. So we're going to go through some basic statements, and then we're going to talk about how to convert that into code. So what we're talking about is logic. So conditionals are probably one of the most fundamental things you're going to use in programming using code. So if we think about this statement, if I am hungry, then I will eat. Otherwise, I will not eat. There's a condition in this statement. So something will happen as a consequence of that condition. So what do you think the condition is here? And this is just regular English, not code. So what would be the condition? So if is like a question, right? So if a condition is true, so if is asking. So eating is something that will happen if the condition is true. So in order to eat, something has to be true in that condition. So if we look at this, we break it down. So we have this if, right? So this is something that we're saying, like, if something is true, if a certain condition is met. So the condition here is I am hungry. And the consequence of that condition being true is I will eat food. So the then is basically like, if that condition is true, do this. And then right after the if is the condition itself. And then we also have something that will happen if the condition is not true. So the else is like an otherwise, like if you, so like here we know that the condition is I am hungry. So if I am not hungry, will I eat food? The question is, if I'm not hungry, will I eat food? Yeah, so I won't, right? So only if I'm hungry will I eat food. So we should think about, this is the condition, this is the consequence of the condition being true. And then this connected to this else is the consequences of the condition being false. So if we were to write this in code, this is a conditional statement. This is written in plain English, so we can understand it on some level. So if we were to convert this into code, it would look like this. So we would have the word if, so that tells processing that we're setting up an if statement, a conditional statement. I'll use those interchangeably. And then the condition itself goes inside of the parentheses. So yeah, I already ate, so I'm not actually that hungry. I had like what's left over of a calzone. It's like a pretty heavy breakfast. So, and this is like not actual code inside of here, but we have whatever will happen if that condition is true. And then you have else. So this is the thing that happens if the condition that's in the parentheses is false. So if it's not true, then we will not eat. And so if we look at another example of a conditional statement, we have, if I am thirsty and I am hot, I will drink cold water. So what do you think, what's a condition here? And then what happens as a consequence of the condition being true? So thirst and heat, right? And I have the chat like way too small, so I can't read people's names. So let me switch it out. So that's okay, Linda. So we have two conditions here. So that's right. So we have the first condition is thirsty, right? So I have to be thirsty, and the second condition is heat. So you have to be hot and thirsty in order to drink cold water. So if you are, according to this statement, if you are thirsty but you are not hot, will you drink cold water, according to this statement? Actually, I'm hot. And I'm thirsty. But I don't have cold water, I only have regular water. Actually, I should open the window. Let me open the window so I'm like not melting here. No, I don't have any ice. I don't know, I have like ice things and they like make it, I don't know, they go in the freezer and then they end up getting kind of gross, and so I just don't use ice. Oh, what I do is I have a pitcher and I fill it with water and then I put it in the fridge. So I have cold water that way. So no ice. So like we said, in order for us to drink cold water, both of those conditions must be met. We must be thirsty and we must be hot. And so we can see that the keywords here in terms of the structure are if and and. So if is proposing a conditional statement, right? And so we have the two conditions here. I am thirsty, I am hot. Either of those can be true or false. And by saying and, we know that they must both be true. So if they're not both true, then I will not drink cold water. So that thing will not happen. Both of those things must be true. And so if we're writing this in code, it would look like this. If thirsty, ampersand, ampersand, hot, drink cold water. So what do you see there that is weird? And this is, again, this is like pseudocode, so it's like code, but it's just showing you how it will be written. Is there anything weird in there? So, and I gotta look up your name, Zach, Dragon Nexus. Double ampersands, right? So ampersands, if you don't know, are the like and symbol. And so we have the two ands. So when you write ampersand, ampersand, or and, it means and. So in code, for whatever reason, that's how we write it. So if we want to write one thing must be true and a second thing must be true, if we want both of those conditions must be met, then we put both of them in parentheses linked by the two ampersands. And so if thirsty is true and hot is false, will we drink cold water? No, you got it. And so if we are thirsty and we are cold, then we might drink hot tea. So both of those conditions have to be true. So if either one of them is false, then the thing will not happen. So if I am tired or it is late, I will go to sleep. And this is not actually true. But if it was true, would you need to be both tired and it to be late to go to sleep? Would you need both of those conditions? Or would you just need one of them? And again, just like everyday English. So we have like a new thing here, a new keyword. The new keyword is or. So we have the if, which is proposing a conditional statement. And then we have two conditions here. What's the first condition? So the first condition is tired, and then the second condition is late, right? So when we say that one of those conditions or the other one must be true, we're saying that only one of the two must be true. So if I am tired, but it is not late, then I will go to sleep. If I am not tired, but it is late, I will go to sleep. What about if I'm tired and it's late? Will I go to sleep if I'm tired and it's late? Yeah, so I will sleep, you're right. So it could be one of them or two of them to be true in order for that thing to happen. If neither of them are true, nothing happens. So if we're writing this in code, we're writing this, so like what is different in terms of like how we write or compared to how we wrote and before? We're using different symbols here. So what are they? Can you find them on the keyboard, put them in the chat? So we're still using the curly brackets from before. So Linda said those lines. So the lines, the two lines in between, when you see that in code, just know that that means or. So we have the two lines, means or. We call those in code, we call them double pipes, is one term for it. I don't know why, they're just lines. And sometimes you see it stylized as having like a little space in between. But whenever you see those things, just remember that they mean or. So in this case, either tired or late must be true. At least one of them. If both of them are true, the thing will happen. If both of them are true or one of them are true. And so up to now, whenever you've written code, you may have used the character equals, right? And you're probably familiar with equals from like math stuff, right? Like 1 + 1 = 2. And so has anyone seen two equal signs next to each other? Have you ever seen that before? Well, now you have, right? You've seen it right here. And you'll see it again. Cool. So yeah, I'm just curious if anyone's seen it before. And so this is like a very common pitfall that we have with people working with code, including myself. So when we use a single equals, we're saying to assign a value. So if we say, for instance, x = 32, we're saying to take x and give it a value of 32. So it's a command, right? If we have two equal signs next to each other, it's usually in a conditional statement. So we have, in this example, we have if x = 10, then do the thing. So instead of giving it a command, instead of saying make x 10, what it means is, does x = 10? So it's like a question. Is x equal to the value of 10? Is this the same? If you put them on a scale, do they even out? And so just know that double equals compares. It compares the thing on the left to the thing on the right. If it's the same, then it gives you true. If it's not the same, it gives you false. So does that make sense? The difference between when you see two equals and when you see one equals? Cool. So if we were to, let's say we had a conditional statement here. So we had if, and then again, the condition goes inside of the parentheses. So if we say if x = 10, that's saying if x is equal to 10, if it has a value of 10, then do the thing. If we say instead x = 10, and I'm sorry for the sounds outside. I'm gonna die if the window's closed again. So if x = 10, it's basically saying like make x 10, and so that doesn't fit. That doesn't fit as a condition. I took my ADHD medicine really late today. So x = 10. So if x = 10 is not actually doing what you think it's doing. It doesn't actually say like is x equal to 10? If it's a single equals, it's saying if, and then it makes x 10. So it doesn't become true or false, so it's not actually a condition. And so what you have here is you're going to have an error, or it's not going to work the way you think it is. So anytime that you have anytime you have an equals in parentheses, it should be double equals, never single equals, because if is asking a question, right? And so if you have the double equals, you're doing a comparison. And so there are other ways to compare things in code. So you might be familiar with some things like less than, greater than, less than or equal to, greater than or equal to. So do people remember stuff like that from math stuff? Like the less than sign, like with the little, this thing. And then the, and then you remember how you had like less than or equal to, you had like, this symbol, and then you had a little line underneath it, and then you have it the other way as well. And so like when we're writing on a keyboard, we can't create this symbol, like the less than or the greater than or equal symbol. And they're on the slides also. And so what we do is we write one symbol first, we write the greater than or the less than first, and then we write the equals. And so that's basically like saying less than or equal to. So when we have this symbol here, less than, and you can remember that less than always refers to the one on the left. So that's like if the thing on the left is less than the thing on the right. How many of you have ever seen this? Exclamation point equals. Has anyone seen this? In math? You have, really? Which math class was that? Do you remember? So I don't think I had ever seen this until I worked with code. But I also never took a high-level math class, so maybe it's in there, I don't know. So when we see the exclamation point followed by the equals, it's not equal. So it's like asking a question, is this not equal to this? So in this case, if x is not equal to 100, that's asking a question. So if x is not equal to 100, so if it's 99, for instance, is 99 equal to 100? No, thank you. So 99 is not equal to 100. So if x had that value, then it would do something because that statement would be true. 99 is not equal to 100. So it could also be, so anytime you want to say not, so it's like the opposite of equals is exclamation point equals. So anytime you see exclamation point, remember that that means not. So anytime in code, you're going to see an exclamation point and you're going to be like, oh God, I remember when she was talking about that in class, but I have no idea what the fuck it means. Remember, the exclamation point means not, N-O-T, not. So if you just read it out loud, it makes more sense. So anytime you see the exclamation point, just remember it means equal, not equal. So like not this, not that, not N-O-T, exclamation point, that's what it means. So if we look at this kind of breakdown, let's say we have a variable called grade, and let's say grade has a value of 86. So the first thing on here is asking the question, if grade is greater than or equal to 90. So is the grade greater than or equal to 90 in this case? If it's 86, is that greater than or equal to 90? Nope. Thank you, Barshar. So it's not, right? It's less than that. So the next thing in terms of this, you could link these this way. So like we have this if statement. So like if this is not true, then it will automatically go down. If there's something that says else, then it will go to the else. And so in this case, we can actually link else if. So this will ask this question if the thing above it was false. So now it goes to the next condition. If grade is greater than or equal to 80, so is the grade greater than or equal to 80 if it has a value of 86? Yes, it is, right? So that value is 86. 86 is greater than or equal to 80. So anything between 80 and 89 would have been true for this category. So then once that's true, it does not need to look or check any of these other things. So what if your grade, if the grade value was not 86, what if it was like 59? Where would it end up? Which comment would we be looking at? By the way, you are fail, thank you. So thank you, Marcus. So if it's 59, it would ask the question, is 59 greater than or equal to 90? The answer is no. So next one, is the grade, if it's not greater than or equal to 90, is it greater than or equal to 80? No. If it's not, then is the grade greater than or equal to 70? If it's not, then etc. until you get to the very bottom. And then there's no other condition. So anything that if this one's false, this one's false, this one's false, and this one's false, it doesn't matter what it is, it's gonna go into this last category. And so I actually I was just thinking about this. So yes, I have Facebook open. So it's really funny, like teaching online, because it feels like there's a lot of I ask a question. This class has been you've been pretty good so far, but just in general, it's like I ask a question and then you kind of wait, and then you answer your own question, and then you as a student feel bad for the professor. Is that right? Is that how it works? Because that's how I feel. just like stare blankly, wait, pray that someone responds. I hope someone's there. I hope my class is alive. I hope everyone's okay. I hope no one's asleep. Yeah, I know, it's just the online thing. I know it's like also like it's hard for people to pay attention from home because you have all these distractions. Like if I just like look around my desk, I have like, you know, I have like a cool sticker, and I've got like, you know, hair bands, and I've got like medications, and I've got like an awesome tape measure, and like so many things to like distract you. So we're gonna try to stay focused here. So I actually was going to talk about collisions more, but let's go ahead and get into some examples first. I think that might be more helpful. So I'm going to go ahead and open up processing. If you want to follow along, you're welcome to follow along. So let me put this up. Arrange my screens here. And then I feel like I'm missing something else. Okay. So let's get into an example. Everyone likes a good example, right? So the first thing I'm going to do in my code is I'm going to put void setup. So I'm going to do void setup. So I'm just going to go ahead and set up my sketch, and then I'm going to do void draw, open close parentheses, open close curly brackets. So what is the thing that we always put inside of setup? Setup, again, remember it runs once at the beginning of running your sketch. So it's the thing that happens just once at the very beginning. So like what will always go inside of setup? Because setup is like going to set up like the window, it's going to make sure everything's running. Any of our initial values are going to go in there. So like what should we put in there? Feeling very Dora like. Sure, what's your question, Nate? So Marcus said the size of the window. So go ahead and ask your question. I'll go ahead and write size. And so I'm just going to pick a size, 1200 for, so like that's the width of the window. And then let's say for the height, I'll do like 800. So I can go ahead and hit play, and I can see how big that is. Depending on the resolution of your screen, it might be bigger or smaller, so you might need to adjust. So Nate asked, can there be multiple different codes, or do the different codes need to be under the same setup and draw? So do you mean that can there be multiple like sketches within one thing? So you have like one setup and one draw for one sketch, and then another setup and another draw in the same like window here? Is that what you mean? So you would need to have them under a different sketch. So you wouldn't be able to do it under the same one. So like I would need to go to like file new, it would need to create a new sketch, and then I'd need to put a separate one in here, and I need to remember to save it also. Does that make sense? Okay, so if you remember, do you remember what it is that we use to draw the background color, to set the background color? What's the thing we use? The code thing. It's very easy. This question is very easy. How do we set the background color? Thank you, TJ. Background, right? And then inside the parentheses, it takes a color. So usually we have 3 values, right? A red value, a green value, and a blue value. So one thing that I have not told you yet is that you can actually use one number. If you want to use one number, it would be a monochromatic color, black and white, so grayscale. So you could do 255. So if we had one thing in here, 255, does anyone know what color that would be? Or do you want to guess? If it's a grayscale color, it's somewhere between black and white. So Zach, right? Is that Dragon Nexus? Yes, Zach. So if it was 255 for the first parameter, then it would be red. So David says white, TJ says gray, and so let's just check it out. So it's actually white. So remember that 255, this is actually shorthand for like 255, 255, 255. So like the easy way to write this, instead of writing 255, 255, 255, is we can just get rid of that and we can just write 255. And so like, if we want to make it black, what do you think the value would be for black? 0. Thank you, David. So we could do anywhere in there from 0 to 255 for a grayscale value. We can't do color that way, but we can do grayscale. And so like in processing, a little tip is if you don't know what something is or how to use it, what you can do is you can like right click on it. You can write, so like I can like highlight like background, for instance. If I'm like, I don't know how to use this, I can right click on it and I can go to find in reference, and it will actually open up the reference page for this exact thing. So like it will take me to the exact page where I can scroll down. It will tell me how to use it. So I can see examples. So I can see an example that says background 51. So that's showing me that it shows like a dark gray kind of color. I can see background with these 3 values. In this case, gives us a yellow color. So you can see different examples of how to write it, different syntaxes. So that's super, super helpful. So anytime you see something or you remember, like I do it somehow, I just don't remember how to do it, just right click on it, find in reference, and it will pop up your browser and tell you exactly how to use it, which is so useful. Okay, so then the next step is like, we're gonna think about, so I did not mention this in class, I don't think, or I mentioned it to individual people, but does anyone, how many of you have used width or height? So those are built-in keywords in processing. So how many of you have used width or height? Just a show of yeses or me's. Yeses or me's. You can write yes or me or no, or not I, not me. And it's okay if you haven't. I'm just curious. So what width does is it gives us the width of the window. So it's a built-in variable in processing. So let's say I wanted to draw an ellipse. So does anyone remember what the 4 parameters, the 4 arguments are that we use for an ellipse? And it also tells you on the bottom when you have this error, it tells you it takes a float, a float, a float, a float. It could also take an integer as well. So what are those 4 things? Does anyone remember what they are in the order? What's the first one? Is this first one? I don't remember how, like, I gotta remember how the screen is set up. This is the first one for you. So, what is this one? You can just guess. It's okay to be wrong. I'm wrong all the time. So the X position, right? Cool. So we have the X position. So let's say we want the X position to be, let's say we want to put our ellipse. So like when we give the X, we're giving the center of the X. So like when you draw, and I have a cool new tool I installed that will let me draw on my screen, which is awesome. So let's say that imagine that this is a perfect circle, which obviously is a perfect circle. Look, it's beautiful. So like when we give it an X value, we're giving it the center of the X. So like, you know, you can imagine that this is like the X axis, right? And so that's the position, right? And then when we give it a Y position, we're giving it the value of the center along the Y. So in this case, we're telling it the center. Does that seem right to people? Do people does that feel good? Feel good? I don't know if it feels good, but does it feel right? Like for the way you've used it so far? I mean, it is right, but I gotta get out of this, let me see. Okay. So if we want to put it in the center of the x-axis, what we can do is we can use this little trick. So like we know that if we write width, notice how it's like a different color. the text is a different color. So that indicates that it's something built into processing. So like we can see that like things like ellipse, background, these are all color coded to tell us that they're something built into processing. So I can say width divided by 2. So let's say that, and I'm going to comment this out for a second. So if our width, so like on the left side of the x-axis, we have 0, right? And so as we go to the right, the value increases until we get all the way to the right, and then the value is 1200, right? So we know that 1200 is the width of the window. So if we think about the middle of the width, which is the width divided by 2, so half of the width will give us the middle here. So if we do width divided by 2, it will give us the middle of the x-axis. So we can center the position. So we can do the same thing for the height. So for if we want to put the y position of our ellipse, we can say height divided by 2. And then let's say that we want to make it, I can make it 200 pixels wide by 200 pixels tall. And so if I run this, now we're drawing our ellipse, which is a circle. We're drawing it in the center of the screen because we told it the x position to be the center of the x-axis, so half of the width is all the way to the right. I can't switch around. All the way to the right, and then height divided by 2 is halfway down. So we start at the top, 0. As we move down the y-axis, it increases until we get to height, which is 800. So it's 800 pixels tall. And then if we divide by half, it's the middle. So we have the middle for the x and the y, and then it's 200 wide and 200 tall. So if we wanted to make it, let's say we wanted to make it like the full width of the window, I could write width here. And then if I run this, now my ellipse is the full width of the window. So it goes from all the way on the left side to all the way on the right side. Does that make sense? Is that how people think about it in terms of like the width is all the way to the right? So because if you think about it, it starts at 0, right? And then when you create the window, it draws it out. So it expands out by however many pixels you say. So I said to expand it out by 1200 pixels to the right. And then I said to expand it out 800 pixels down. So how do people feel about that? Does that make sense? Is that how can you imagine it that way? Okay, cool. And if you have any questions at all, stop me, let me know. I am happy to answer your questions. I am here for you. I want to help you. Cool. So now if we think about, and I'm going to comment this out, don't forget that a single comment is 2 forward slashes. And so let's say that we wanted to, so how many of you have used mouse X or mouse Y? This is another one of those built-in ones. We haven't talked about it in class, but it's some people have already used it. Some people haven't. It's okay if you haven't used it so far. So just let me know in the chat, have you used mouse X and or mouse Y? So I can actually just, instead of, let's say that I wanted to draw, and I'm still watching the chat, so let me know. So instead of putting it at the center, cool. So I'm glad to hear that people are using the tutoring. It's awesome. So if you missed it last time, we have tutoring through Onyx. There was a message in the general announcements channel, or whatever it's called, forum on River. So there's a Discord where you can get help. So we have a paid tutor for this class. So for the ellipse here, if instead of putting it in the center, let's say I wanted to use, sorry, not with mouse X. So if I run this, what's going to happen is this is a variable that will automatically update. And so it's going to take my cursor's X position. So mouse X is the mouse X position. And so when I tie it into the X position of our ellipse, that means that wherever it is on the X axis, it's going to put the center of my ellipse at the same point. Does that make sense? Now it's not following the Y because it's still drawing the Y position at the middle of the y-axis. If I wanted it to follow the y position, I could alternatively write mouse y, and then it's going to follow both axes. So does that make sense to people? I know some people have already used it, but for other people who haven't used it, does that make sense how this is like an automatically updating variable? It's built into processing, and it will update to be the X and the Y position of the cursor. So it's very useful. You can say no if it doesn't make sense. It's okay. I want to know if it doesn't make sense so I can explain it better. Cool. How about other people? So I'm gonna take that silence to mean that like everyone is like 100% awesome, ready to go, ready to take on the next programming class after this one, done for the semester. Gosh, it's brutal, brutal. Come on, please. I know you're not malicious. You have questions? Let me know, please. Don't let me leave your questions unanswered. I want to help you. I want to help you. I want you to succeed. Okay. So let's think about, okay, awesome. Thank you. I love my students. All right, so let's imagine that we want to be able to control something depending on the position of the cursor, for instance. So we can use an if statement to check if a condition is true. So we write if, right? So that's the first thing we write. And we can write open parentheses, close parentheses, open curly bracket, closing curly bracket. That's the basic structure for an if statement. And so inside of the parentheses goes the thing that is the condition itself. So if a condition is, please, I don't want to be Dora. Okay, so if the condition goes here, then the thing inside of the curly brackets is whatever happens if that condition is true. So we can think about a condition here. For instance, if the condition is, we can think about like the mouse X position. We can think about if it's on the left side of the screen or if it's on the right side. So we can think about if the mouse X, and actually before I even do this, let me comment this out. Has anyone used println? So it actually stands for print line. So this is like a really old school thing, and it's cool if you haven't, we haven't talked about it. So this is usually for like debug things. So we have at the bottom what's called the console, right? And so like you've probably seen like errors in this red part, and then sometimes you may have seen some other stuff down there. So what we can do is we can actually write messages to ourselves. So these will help us like debug things. So I could write something like mouse X inside the parentheses, and what this will do if I run it is right now it shows you a value of 0, and if I move it, if I move mouse X, I can see how it changes the value down here. So it's showing us, it's communicating that value to us, so we can sort of like, you know, open up the computer and look inside and know what's going on inside. So that's very helpful for us. So like we can see how that works. You could also see how like mouse Y if you wanted to. So I can see what that value is. So like I can see that 0 is at the top, and as I move down the Y-axis, it will increase all the way down to like 800, which is the height of our screen. And so I can write text in here as well using a string. So strings are encapsulating quotation marks. So I can say mouse Y position is end quote plus. So what this will do is it will actually print out this string, this text. Since it's in quotation marks, it will not treat it as code. It knows that it's text. So it'll print this text plus the mouse Y value. So if I run this, it tells me exactly what it is. So I can write messages to myself to remind me or to tell me what it is, because sometimes you need help understanding what's happening behind the scenes. And so if I wanted to, for instance, be able to tell if the cursor was on the top, so like the top half. So we know how to find the middle of the x-axis and the y-axis, right? So what is the middle? How do we write the middle of the y-axis in the examples that I just gave earlier? Do you remember how we find it? If height is the total, is the bottom, right? So it goes from 0 at the top to height at the bottom, the value. So like, how do we get the middle of that? How do we get the middle of the y-axis? Please tell me you don't know if you don't know. I'm gonna have to like work on my like acting skills so I can start crying in class. I'm pretty good at crying, gotta say. So 400 would be the value, right? But let's say that we want to use something that's already built into processing. So we know that height is the bottom, right? So 0 is the top, height is the bottom. So rather than having to know what this value is, because like if we create a new sketch, it might be a different value. What we can do is we can remember that half the height, so the height is the bottom, so half of that height is the middle of the y-axis. So to get half, we do height divided by 2, and I should put mouse y also. So if mouse y is less than half the height, that means the value is between 0 and 400, right? So that means that it's up here. So if we want to do something in this case, we can, for instance, set a fill value maybe. So let's say we want the fill value to be, what's a color, what color should we use? So like this is the color we'll use if the ellipse is on the top half. So like if the mouse Y is on the top half of our window. And I'm gonna make this a little bit smaller. Maybe I'll make it like 20. So what color should we make it if it's on the top half? And this is, there's no right answer, just give me a color. Green, okay. So we have, let's say I'm gonna do, so the first one is, so we'll do pink for the bottom, how about that? So we have, let's say 50 for the red, and then 255 for the green, and then 50 for the blue. So if I run this, right now it's always green because we haven't set the fill value to another thing. So we have, as long as this is true, it will set the fill value to be green. So like if we want it to be a different color, oh sorry, I missed blue in the middle. Now I have too many colors. So we can do an else, right? So like if this condition is false, if the mouse Y position is not on the top half, then it will run whatever is here in the else. So we could set the value to, so I'm gonna use blue since blue was first. Sorry, Zach. So we could do, let's see, 50, 50, 255, for instance. And so now if we run it like this, you can see, maybe I'll make it a little bit bigger, maybe like 50. You can see that if the mouse Y position is less than half of the height, it's green. If it's not, if it's anywhere else, then it will be blue. And we can set the background color to pink since Zach suggested pink. So let's think. So that's it's like a lighter red. So that's 255, let's say 100. Let's see if that works. Is that pink? It's kind of like a salmon, I guess. Maybe a little bit less, and maybe a little bit more green blue. Let's see. That's close. So we can see how the color changes depending on that position. and it's automatically updated depending on where that, because mouse Y is always going to update. It's always going to know wherever that position is. So it's telling us using the print line so we can tell. So I could comment this out. I could give a message here saying like print line, print ln. ln stands for line. Cursor is on top. So this will give us the message cursor is on top if it's on top, and then we could write print ln cursor is not on top. So if I run this, you can see the message in here. So cursor is not on top, cursor is on top. So we can see when that code is executing. So if this condition is true, it will execute all these lines of all these lines of code. If this condition is false, it will not execute these lines of code, and it will in fact skip to the next thing, right? So does that make sense? How do people feel about that? Can you give me like a number between 1 to 5 in the chat for how you're feeling about what we just talked about? You can give a 1 if you don't know where you are. You're totally lost. You're like, you don't even know what class you're in. And you can give a 5 if you're ready to like advance the next class. You're ready for the test at the end of the semester. You're totally solid. You're like next level. So just give me a number in the chat, 1 to 5. 1, I don't know where I am. 5, godlike. Oh, hey, Brayden. I didn't see you there. Let me mark you on the attendance. Cool. So it seems like no one's completely lost, but people are a little unsure. So usually people would... Omni, I didn't see you there either. I think I saw you in the chat earlier. Making sure. Anyone else come in late? I want to make sure I get the attendance right. Also, any guests in our class? Any non-students? Okay, so let's think about another example. So let's say that, and I'm trying not to hit you with too much material. So let's think about if, so I'm going to start a new example here. And so I'm going to do my void setup and void draw. And so let me see, just a second. All right, so we have our size, right? So let's say I'm gonna make it 1200 by 800. Let's say that we're gonna draw an ellipse and we're gonna need variables for the X and the Y position. So I can write int X, I can write int Y. So these will declare new integers called X and called Y. So I can give these initial values inside of setup. So like, let's say X equals, if I wanted to put it all the way on the left, that would be a value of 0. And then if I want to put it all the way on, let's say the middle. So like if I want it to be on the middle of the Y axis, how would I get half of the height? So I could say Y equals, so we want to make it half of the height. So how do I write that in code so that I place it in the middle of that axis? Does anyone know? Does anyone remember? Nobody remembers? So remember how we were checking if this was in the top half, because this is the middle, right? So the middle, so it wouldn't be Y plus 40. So we're trying to figure out, this is our height, right? 800. So we can write height, so height is 800, and if we divide by 2, then that is going to put it on the middle. So I haven't actually drawn it yet, but does it make sense how this is the middle? Let's say we want to put it we want to put the x value in the center of the x-axis. We would write width divided by 2. And so I'll just draw it so you can see. So if I write ellipse, and then I give it the value of x and the value of y, and I say, let's say it has 50 pixels wide by 50 pixels tall. That's going to be on the middle of the x-axis because width is, so like this is 0 on the x, right? And then width is all the way to the right. And so if you like, let me draw this, let's see. If you like, so like this is 0 and this is width. And so if you think about like this, like measuring, if you think about like half of the width of the window is the width, right? So the width divided by 2 is saying like divide width into like 2 chunks. So half of that is here. So this is, does that make sense? So it's width divided by 2. So, oops, turn this off, okay. So then height divided by 2 is like the height of the window is the bottom, cut it in half. That's the middle of the y-axis. So, okay, so like let's say that we wanted this to move, right? So what could we do to make it move to the right? What would we have to change? Which variable will we change to make it move to the right? We have 2 variables. We have x and we have y, right? X is the position along the x-axis. Y is the position along the y-axis. So what would we need to change? Which variable and how would we change it in order to move it to the right? To make it animate, to drift over to the right. So we only have 2 choices here. Which one? We want to move it to the right. Do we modify the x or do we modify the y? So the y is the vertical axis, right? So if we want to move it to the right, it will be the x-axis. So David got it. So, because remember, like, I know it's like kind of confusing sometimes if you're thinking about like how to like figure out where it is, because like sometimes I think about like where it is and I think about like I'm going along the x-axis and I'm like making a vertical line, so that might be confusing for people if you're thinking about it similarly. But just remember, the x is always a position along the horizontal axis, so the axis going left to right. So if we want to make it move either left or right, we have to modify the x position. If we want to make it move up or down, we need to modify the y position. And so if we want to make this x move, we could say like x equals x plus 1, for instance. And so what that will do is it will take the x position and it will add 1, so that each frame it's 1 pixel to the right of where it previously was. And so does anyone know why there's this trail behind? Do you know why it's leaving behind a trail? And I briefly mentioned it in class before, but you might have missed it. What did we do in the other thing that we didn't do here? The previous sketch, the previous example. What do we do that's like an important difference that's giving us that trail? Ignore this highlight. Does anyone know? So that is something different that we did, but that's not why we're getting the trail though. So it's a good guess. So in this case, and I'm gonna shrink this, we have where we're drawing the background. So like if we don't draw the background in the beginning of draw, what it shows us is it shows us every previous frame. So basically like it draws it, imagine you have a sheet of paper, right? So like the first frame you draw the circle, right? And then the second frame it's like the same sheet of paper and you just move it over and you draw it again. And the third frame you draw it again. And so what happens is you can actually see all the previous frames. So it's just like you're drawing it over all the previous ones. So yes, David, that background. So if we write that background, like let's say that we want a background of black. So 0 is black. So if I run this, now we don't see a trail at all, because every time it runs again, remember that like it's a new frame, it executes like the first line, the second line, the third line, the fourth line, the fifth line, and then when it gets to the end, it starts back over for the next frame. So when we have it draw the background, it actually clears, it basically like fills the entire background, so the previous frame gets overridden. So we don't see it anymore. So if we want to, like a question that a lot of people had was, how do I make it bounce, right? So like, if this ellipse is moving over here, how do we make it go back, right? So that was maybe like 5 people, which is like half the class, had this question last time. And so we have to think about, and I'm trying to think about like, what's the best way, the easiest way to do this. So we can think about like we have every time we move it, this is the speed, it's increasing by 1 each frame. So I could also call that x speed. So let's say that an initial x speed is 1. So if I, instead of adding 1, I add x speed. So this is going to do the same thing because x speed is still 1, so it's still going to move at the same rate, right? It's going to keep moving forever, basically, because we haven't told it to do otherwise. And so if we want it to change its behavior, let's say that where might be a good place to make it bounce? If it's moving to the right, where should we make it bounce? Where do you think? Nobody has a good idea? So width is a good spot, right? So width is the width of the window, so like width is the right side. So thank you. So if we were to go in here, we have to think about like, so this positive direction, so remember when you add something to the x position, it's gonna go in which direction. So if this is +1, it's moving which direction? I'll play it again. Which direction is that? Right, yes. So if I was to make it, let's say it was -1. So if it was -1, that would be like plus minus, and when you add a plus and a minus together, it becomes minus. So minus would be left, positive would be right. So we know that whether this is positive or negative determines the direction. So if we were to try to think about where we want it to bounce off of, we could use an if statement, right? So we could have if our x position is greater than width. So when we say greater than width, remember that it's going to increase, right? And then when it goes beyond width, it's going beyond the right side of the window. So in this case, we want something to happen if it goes beyond the right side of the window. So if we want to make anything, let's say we have a value. Let's say we have 5. What do we have to multiply 5 by to make it -5? 5 times what equals -5? So David said -1, so that's right. So if we want to reverse the direction, so x speed is not only the speed, but it's also the direction. So if it's +1, we want to make it -1. So we take x speed and we say equals x speed times -1. And so whatever this value is, it will then make it the negative version. So if it's 1, it'll make it -1, so it'll start moving to the left. And so it's kind of slow right now, so we're just gonna watch it. And so when that center of the ellipse gets all the way to the right, then x speed goes from being 1 to being -1. Is it gonna bounce off the left when it hits it? You only have like a second left to put it in the chat. So it did not bounce off the left, it bounced off the right. So it bounced based on this, right? So if the x position, so it increased, it increased, it increased, it increased, and as soon as it was greater than width, it became the opposite direction. It became negative, and so it went back. But we didn't tell it to switch if it got all the way to the left, right? Sorry, it's confusing when you say left, right. We didn't say if it's all the way to the left. So we have to do a second if statement, right? So if x is, so what do we know the leftmost value on the x-axis is? Gosh, I need more water. My throat is so dry from talking. So we know that width is the right side. So the width of the window. Let me just comment this out. So Marcus said 0, right? So remember, left side is 0, right side is width, the width of the window. So if we want to check if the x is to the left of 0, will we be checking if it's less than or greater than 0? We want to check if it's past 0. So would that be less than or greater than? So less than, thank you. So we're checking if x is less than 0 because we know if it's like -5, we know it's past 0. So in this case, we want to do the same thing that we did on line 18. We want to say x speed equals x speed times -1. So that's the opposite direction. So, and let's say I want to make it faster. So by using variables here instead of hard coding it, it makes it really easy to change it. So like here where we set the x speed, the initial speed was 1. Let's say we want to make it 5 times faster. I just write 5 here. So now when it moves, you can see that it bounces off the right because we told it to here. And then when it hits the left, it bounces because we told it to here. So this is the right side. So if it goes past the right boundary, and then bounce if it goes past the left boundary. So to folks see how that worked, we checked if it was to the right. So we made it negative. The same here as the same here. So this is the right side. If it goes past the right side, bounce back. If it goes past the left side, bounce back. Make sense? So it switches the direction each time. Because x speed, if it's positive, it means to the right. If it's negative, it means to the left. My goodness, is that a bad thing or a good thing? I don't know if that's good or bad. I hope it's good. Classified, okay. Well, I mean, I don't have to help, you know. I want to help, but So I'm writing comments in here so that when I put this online, you'll be able to know what I'm saying, what's happening. Okay, so your homework, and I'm going to post it later today, is going to be to basically make different areas of your screen that someone has to hover over in order to make something happen. So you're going to make things change based on the position of the cursor. So it's going to be, you're going to make like, I'm going to say like make a monster out of shapes, and you're going to make that monster dance based on the cursor position. So if the cursor position is on one part of the screen, make it dance a certain way. If it's on another part of the screen, make it dance a different way. And by dance, I just mean move in a certain way. So you can think about how to do that. So you would use it based on mouse X and mouse Y. Yeah, so like if you're trying to figure out something based on the cursor position, you're going to use mouse X and mouse Y. And so that was based on the other example that we did together, which is this one. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put these on open processing right now. So I'm going to go ahead and create a sketch. So if you forgot how to do this, make sure you delete all this stuff. Don't forget to delete it. So I'm going to take all this, I'm going to copy it, I'm going to paste it over here. Don't forget to switch the engine to processing.js so you can run it and see how it changes. So I'm going to save this as GD105 underscore F20 underscore if mouse X / Y. Okay, so I'm going to submit that. So if you want to find it, all you have to do is go to my profile. You're going to find a lot of examples. So I'm going to upload this other one. So I'm going and selecting all. I'm copying. I'm taking all of this. I'm replacing it with what I wrote. I'm switching this to processing.js. I'm hitting play to make sure everything is working properly. I'm saving it, so I'll call this GD105 underscore F20 underscore basic bounce. And now it's available, so if anyone wants to see it, you can find all of my examples on my open processing page. I just put it in the chat if you want to check it out. Yeah, so that's it for today. So for next week, you're going to have a prototype of this work that you're going to share with other people. So you have to make sure that it's submitted before class begins, and then you can keep working on it after it's submitted, but it needs to be submitted before class. Okay? So I hope that I hope it made sense. If not, you'll be able to go back and review today's lesson, and hopefully the second time around it might make a little bit more sense. And as you practice, so like practice is the thing that's going to help you understand it the best. The more you practice, the more it will work. So the link is not working. Is that what you mean? So I'm going to hang out here for a few more minutes, but that's it for class. So thank you all for coming and participating. Please chat more, please. It makes me feel good when people are participating. Even if you don't know what's going on, you have to speak up, because I won't know to help you, right? I won't know to slow down, and I want to help you. I want to make sure that you're successful. Cool. Yeah, there are some good tutorials. So if you know of any good tutorials, put them in the chat on River. So share them with other people so they could be helpful. And so like you'll be able to look at my examples. I have a ton of examples if you want to look through them. Some of them are more advanced stuff, some of them are simpler things. So just take a look. I'll post the homework later today, and I'll see you on Monday, okay? So I hope you have a good week.